Hello and welcome to Harbor.Church. We're so glad you're with us today, whether watching online or joining us in person. We're the Gedney family. I'm Peter.
I'm April.
I'm Molly. And I'm Emily.
I think I speak for my whole family when I talk about Harbor.Church. The thing that stands out the most to us is just the realness and the fact that you don't have to have it all together to be a part of the family of God. Harbor recognizes that we are all broken and we all have struggles, and they offer a message of hope. In the wise words of Pastor Josh, who we often hear him say, "Yo bro, home slice, we're all dumpster fires and we all need Jesus." So before I embarrass my children anymore,
Let's get into the service.
You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. And I worship you. I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, mending every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 Even when I don't see it, you work, man. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are.
Hey guys, good morning and welcome to Harbor Online. My name is Allison. I just want to say special good morning and welcome to our all online service this morning. I'm really excited because I get to do church in my pajamas and my fuzzy socks. I've got my coffee here and my laptop and I'm really excited, so I hope you are too. Turn that volume up, drop us a comment down and let us know you're watching. I just want to say a very special welcome to you guys who are new to Harbor, who are just checking us out for the first time or one of the first times. We don't take it for granted that new people are coming into our doors and hearing about Jesus for the first time. So we just want to say a very special welcome to you, and we want to say thank you for checking us out and give you a gift. So if you're new around here, if you will click that link in the description of the video, or we're going to drop it in the comments right now as well. Click that link, fill out a form so we can get to know you a little bit more. And then we're gonna send you a gift just to say thanks and to welcome you to Harbor a little bit. And if you're been around for a long time, still click that link. It'll take you to a page where you can get all of the links to get to know what's going on at Harbor, sign up for some stuff, get some more information. Speaking of something that's happening in the next few weeks is our bags and blankets drive. So this is something we do every year to benefit the homeless population in Hyannis. So obviously it's getting very cold outside and we just want to make sure that everyone in our community is safe and warm and cared for the best that we can. So we already bought all of the backpacks, and actually good news, they're all gone. So that is awesome because they're already being filled up, but you can still help out if you want to bring in a brand new sleeping bag or blanket to the church on or before January 31st. That would be awesome. You can still contribute, and don't forget, if you have a backpack and you haven't filled it up, make sure and do that and bring it back to the church by the 31st as well. We also have baptisms coming up in February. If you think that baptisms might be the next step for you, I encourage you to go over to the link in the comments. We'll drop it now. Sign up and we'll get in contact with you to kind of have a conversation about if that's the right step. We're really excited about having those very soon. They'll be inside, so you don't have to be in the ocean in February, I promise. But it's gonna be awesome. We are so excited about having online service, like I said. So don't forget, comment down below, let us know that you're watching, that you're listening. If there's a good point, give us a thumbs up, all of that stuff, and it's gonna be awesome. So we're really glad that you're watching. Let's get into it, you guys.
Good morning, Harbor. Glad to have you worshiping the Lord together with us today. My name's Ron. I'm the executive pastor here at Harbor.Church. And back at the beginning of the year, Pastor Josh had scheduled a personal day or weekend off to be with his wife, and it was this weekend, so he asked me to speak. And I just want to thank Pastor Josh for asking me to come and share the Word of God with you today, and hope everything goes good for him while he's away this weekend. We are studying or having a series on the subject of hindsight. Hindsight is 20/20, as we say, and we're wanting to refocus our attention on things. And so when I began thinking about my message, I realized that hindsight is taking where I'm standing at this moment in life, and I'm turning around and looking backwards in time at my history, and there are things there that don't necessarily make sense to me at this particular time, and when they happen, and as I look back, then hopefully there's a refocus that's given to me so I can more clearly see how it's going to apply or be used into my future. And so what I want to do today is I want to look at a couple of different stories in the Bible and where things as they happened did not make sense. They were confusing probably to the people involved in them, and then see what lessons we can learn from that. And so just in getting our minds thinking along those lines, in the book of Daniel, chapter 2, verse 20 and verse 21, it says, "Praise the name of God forever." Now, when Daniel was writing this, he had been commissioned to interpret something for the king that nobody else could. And then since they could not interpret it, their focus was not clear. The king said, "Okay, I'm going to kill all of you." And so Daniel says, no, give me a couple of moments and see if I can do something with it. And so he says, "Praise the name of God forever. He controls the course of the world events. He removes kings and he sets up other kings. He reveals deep and mysterious things and knows what lies hidden in the darkness." Now, in the Old Testament times, there was kings that would be sitting on thrones, and there was a certain process that they would go through. It didn't matter the culture, they all went through the same process. And what that was is that when a warring nation came in and took over a subservient nation at that point, the reigning king would step in. He would kill the past king of that nation and all of their family, so that there wasn't going to be any rivalry for the possession of the throne. And the children of Israel entered into the same culture, because that's the world that they were living in. And Israel's first king was King Saul. The Bible says that he stood taller than anybody else in the kingdom. God didn't necessarily want them to have a king, but because they asked for one and they continued to ask for one, God said, "Okay, I will give you a king." And it was King Saul. And he made decisions that some of them were very good and godly, but he also made other decisions that they weren't right. And so God said, "Okay, King Saul, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the kingdom from you and from your descendants." Now, the next person in line for the kingdom after King Saul would die or step down from his throne was his son Jonathan. And so the lineage should have gone from King Saul to Jonathan, and then as time progressed, it would go down through the line of Jonathan to his children. But because of King Saul's sin that he committed in his life, God said, "I'm cutting it off. You're not going to remain king, and it's not going to pass down to the rest of your posterity." And so God began looking for another one to become king, and he found the shepherd boy David and had his prophet anoint David to be king. And Pastor Josh has mentioned several times in messages about David and his relationship to his brothers and going out and fighting Goliath and winning that war and all those kind of things that were going on. But David and Jonathan were best of friends. Not only were they brother-in-laws, because when King David killed Goliath, King Saul gave David one of his daughters, one of King Saul's daughters, to marry. And so that made King Saul his father-in-law. That also made Jonathan the next in line for the throne as his brother-in-law. But they became best of friends. And Jonathan realized the working of God in the history of Israel at that time, and he knew that David was going to be the one to sit on the throne. And so he and David talked together, and they made commitments and promises to each other. And David at one point said to Jonathan, he said, "Jonathan, I want to promise you. It doesn't matter what happens to you, and it doesn't matter what happens to me. If or when I sit on the throne, I promise you, Jonathan, that I will be good to all of your children and to all of your heritage. I will treat them right. I promise I will not harm them. I will not kill them or do anything like that." And so Saul and Jonathan go out to battle. Both of them are killed in battle. And word gets back to the palace, And Jonathan's son, whose name we know is Mephibosheth, he's a young boy at that time, and so the nursemaid that he had, she picked him up, and she was going to run out of the castle to protect this heir of the king so that he could sit on the throne. And as she's running out of the castle, she drops Mephibosheth, and it does some kind of permanent damage to him, and he becomes a paraplegic. He's not able to walk from that time through the rest of his life. And so David comes down and begins having interaction with Jonathan and then King Saul's brother that would be the next in line, because Mephibosheth has been crippled, and no cripple can sit on a throne and be a king in a nation back then. And his brother's name is Ishbosheth. And so what I want to do is I want to look for a moment at the interaction between David and Ishbosheth and all that's going on, and also between David and Mephibosheth. So story one that I want to talk to you about is in 2 Samuel chapter 4 and verse 4, and it says, Saul's son Jonathan had a son named Mephibosheth, who was crippled as a child. He was 5 years old when the report came from Jezreel that Saul and Jonathan had been killed in battle. When the child's nurse heard the news, she picked him up and fled, but as she hurried away, she dropped him, and he became a cripple. Now, what happens because this crippling came into his life is no longer can he sit on the throne of King Saul, his grandfather, or the throne that his father Jonathan should have inherited. And so the natural line of lineage of servitude or serving as king would go to the next in line in King Saul's family, which was his brother, whose name is Ishbosheth. And I begin reading in verse 5, where it says, One day, Rechab and Baanah, the sons of Rimmon from Beeroth, went to Ishbosheth's house around noon as he was taking his midday rest. The doorkeeper, who had been sifting wheat, became drowsy and fell asleep, so Rechab and Baanah slipped past her. They went into the house and found Ishbosheth sleeping on his bed. They struck and killed him and cut off his head. Let me stop for just a moment and just interject here a thought to you that there are some people that are more interested in trying to make God like them than they are allowing themselves to be made more like God. And so we have these two men that are servants to the king, and in their minds they get this plan going that they think, okay, Ishbosheth should be the next king of Israel, and we know that David is going to be the next king, and so we're going to kill Ishbosheth. And so they go in, and they take his head off, and they fled across the Jordan Valley through the night. Then when they arrived in Hebron, they presented Ishbosheth's head to David. Look, they exclaimed to the king, here is the head of Ishbosheth, the son of your enemy Saul, who tried to kill you. Now again, not only was Saul David's king, but Saul was also his father-in-law, and throughout their relationship, Saul's and David's, King Saul continually tried to kill David because Saul realized, after God pronounced the removal of the kingdom, that David was going to be the next one sitting on the throne. And so in Saul's mind, he thinks, okay, if I can kill David, then I can preserve the lineage to go back to my son Jonathan. And so repeatedly, King Saul was always after David and trying to pursue him and trying to kill him and trying to remove his potential of sitting on the throne. And so these guys feel like, okay, Ishbosheth, David's enemy, will kill him, and David will be happy with us. And so they say, here's the head of Ishbosheth. Today the Lord has given my lord the king revenge on Saul and his entire family. But David said to Rechab and Baanah, the Lord who saves me from all of my enemies is my witness. Someone once told me Saul is dead, thinking he was bringing me good news. But I seized him and killed him at Ziklag. That's the reward I gave him for his news. How much more should I reward evil men who have killed an innocent man in his own house and on his own bed. Shouldn't I hold you responsible for his blood? And shouldn't I rid the earth of you? Verse 12 says, so David ordered his young men to kill them. And they did. And they cut off their hands and their feet and hung their bodies beside the pool in Hebron. Then they took Ishbosheth's head and buried it in Abner's tomb in Hebron. In going through this, if I were sitting in Ishbosheth's shoes, if I were in his thinking, in his mind, and I was looking back to the past, and I was trying to get a 20/20 hindsight to get it clear, I would look at all of my life experience, I would look at the culture in which I've grown up in, and I would realize that when King Saul, my dad, dies, then Jonathan is the next one who becomes the king. But when Jonathan dies, I'm next in line and I become king. And so he begins setting himself up to become the king, because that's what his culture says. But while he's sleeping, someone comes into his room, two people, they kill him and they cut off his head. I'm just telling you, that makes no sense whatsoever to sit down and think about that in the moment. What did his family think? What did that doorkeeper think who fell asleep so that the other two could come in and kill her master? There just has to be all kinds of questions, because that's just not clear. It just doesn't make sense. And so Israel changed his name. It was not originally Ishbosheth, but what his name meant originally was that he was a master. He was born with the name and with the recognition that he would be a leader. But his name was changed and became Ishbosheth. And what Ishbosheth means is shamed because he took what wasn't his. And so Israel realized after the fact, the reason that this happened to him was God allowed that because he was taking on himself the throne of King Saul, which really wasn't King Saul's throne. It now belonged to David, who had not yet been coronated. But he took it upon himself, and so he was killed and removed so that that could not happen. And so Israel changed his name to mean that he is shamed because he took what did not belong to him. But then we have Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth was in line for the throne before Ishbosheth was, because he was Jonathan's son. And yet when they were leaving, when he was 5 years old, and the nursemaid dropped him and shattered his back or whatever she did to permanently make him unable to walk, that act alone made him to where he could never, ever be the king, because people with that type of harm done to their bodies could not sit in the place of a king and give ruler to a nation. 2 Samuel chapter 9, there's a second story. And it says, one day David asked, is anyone in Saul's family still alive? So David now is king. He's sitting down. He's wanting to put things in order. And so he's thinking, he said, I made a promise to Jonathan, my best friend. And I promised him that if there was anybody left in his family when I became king, I would be kind to them. And so he brings all of his staff in. He says, is anybody still alive who is part of the lineage of King Saul? Well, in their minds, undoubtedly, they're thinking, he's wanting to kill them. He's wanting to wipe them away so that they cannot have an opportunity to sit on his throne. And so he says, is anyone in Saul's family still alive? Anyone to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake? So he immediately steps in and says, I want to find somebody in King Saul's family, but the reason I want to do that is not to kill them. I want to show kindness to them because I made promises to Jonathan, and I want to fulfill those promises. So David summoned a man named Ziba, who had been one of Saul's servants. David asked, are you Ziba? And he said, "Yes, sir, I am." Verse 3, the king then asked him, "Is anyone still alive from Saul's family? If so, I want to show goodness and kindness to them." Ziba replied, "Yes, one of Jonathan's sons is still alive. He is crippled in both feet." People with special needs, again, were not allowed to even not only sit on the throne, but they weren't allowed to come into the presence of the king, because not only did a country want someone who was weak in appearance to be their king, but kings did not want anybody coming into their presence who had the appearance of weakness to their kingdom. So in verse 4, David says, "Where is he?" the king asked. "In Lodibar," Ziba told him, "at the home of Machir, son of Ammiel." So David sent for him and brought him from Machir's home. His name was Mephibosheth. He was Jonathan's son and Saul's grandson. When he came to David, he bowed low to the ground in deep respect. And David said, "Greetings, Mephibosheth." Mephibosheth replied, "I am your servant." "Don't be afraid," David said. "I intend to show kindness to you because of my promise to your father Jonathan." Mephibosheth's name, as I told you, was changed by the Israelites, and what it became known as is shamed because he's disqualified. And so that ending to a name Bosheth, whether it's Ishbosheth or Mephibosheth, that Bosheth means shamed. We need to be careful. I need to be careful of the reputation that I allowed to be built around my name. I can do things in life, or I can have things in life happen to me that would cause other people to treat me as if I am ashamed of something. "I will give you," David continues, "I will give you all the property that once belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will eat here with me at the king's table." And so, in other words, Mephibosheth, hiding, not even living in Israel any longer, fearful for his life, not able to walk, having to have people carry him wherever he went. This Mephibosheth, having been in line to be the king, but because somebody else dropped him and it disqualified him, he no longer has a chance in the world of not only being the king, but not even coming into the palace, into the king's presence. And so David brings him in, and he's talking to him, which was a great honor to Mephibosheth. But as he's talking, he says, "Everything that belonged to your grandfather Saul, here it is, bud. It's yours. I give it all to you." And in just a moment, we're going to read that David also provides all of the staff that are needed to operate the house and the property and all of the inheritance of King Saul, so that Mephibosheth now has a life of ease. Then the king summoned, verse 9, Saul's servant Ziba, and said, "I have given your master's grandson everything that belongs to Saul and his family. You and your sons and servants are to farm the land for him to produce food for your master's household. But Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, will eat here at my table." I did a little study on Ziba, and the Bible says that he had 15 sons plus all of the servants that they had. And so David gives to, you talk about a lottery, $700 million, $800 million, nothing compared to what David is giving to Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth didn't deserve any of it. What he truly deserved, according to culture, was that he would be killed. And yet David, because of a promise he made to his best friend, gives everything to Mephibosheth and provides him with everything he needs to maintain it. Verse 11, Ziba replied, "Yes, my lord the king, I am your servant, and I will do all that you have commanded." And from that time on, Mephibosheth ate regularly at David's table, like one of the king's own sons. And so because of the heart and the actions of King David, what had been taken away from Mephibosheth was given back to him so that he had all the rights and all the privileges as if he were David's sons. Now, I'm telling you this, and I'm sitting there, if I'm listening, scratching my head and saying, Ron, okay, that's all good. I appreciate the stories. History lesson, great. I enjoy learning different things about different cultures. But what does that mean to me? How do I apply this? How is this a 2020 hindsight situation for me and for my life and for my family? Glad you asked. What I want to do is I want to take a look for just a couple of moments in our remaining time together, and I want to ask and try to answer, who is Harbor.Church? How would you define that? If I came up to you or one of your friends in the culture came up to you and said, okay, I hear you're attending or you're part of that Harbor.Church down there. Tell me, who is Harbor.Church? Well, some may answer, well, our buildings, they're beautiful, and every time we meet, according to COVID standards at least, our property is filled with people worshiping God. We need more parking space. We need greater giving so that we can do more for missions and spreading the gospel around the world. We need to hire new staff so that we can continue on the track that God has us moving on. But that's not who we are. So I ask again, who is Harbor? You say, well, our attendance this year is larger than what it was last year. And true, even in the midst of COVID, Harbor.Church is growing, and we're thankful to God for that. But could I just throw out for a moment a consideration for us that it is possible for us to rely on the natural growing of Harbor to the point that we no longer do what God has called us to do so that Harbor will continue to grow and start our 27 churches and spread the gospel to the other side of the earth and across our nation and see people come to Jesus Christ? That's not who we are. I ask again, who is Harbor? Well, to try to answer that, the church in its beginning set up core values, and let me just give you a quick definition of what I believe core values are. You cut me anywhere on this body, and I'm going to bleed the DNA of the Sears family because that is who my dad was. I received his DNA, and it flows throughout my body. So I don't care where you would cut me, I bleed Sears DNA. And core values in my thinking, in my mind, fit that kind of a concept. Cut Harbor anywhere you want to, and there are certain things that we just bleed. It's just us. It just defines who we are. And so let me just quickly run through these. One of our core values is that we're real. Pastor Josh uses a phrase often. If you attend our service or watch us online, you will hear him say that we're all dumpster fires. And we are. We accept and are thankful for anybody who comes here because I don't care what your condition or your situations in life are. My situations in life are just as jacked up. I'm just as much a dumpster fire as anybody else is. Another core value is that we are serving. In other words, we want to be known more for what we give than what we take. And when we say that we are known for serving, it's that we have a reputation and a testimony, but we have a passion that we want to give into our community. We want to do things to bless other people who are not even part of our church. Another one is we're generous. In other words, everything that we have, we use it to help other people. Our time, our talents, our treasures, even our testimony. It's all for the purpose of being a blessing to others. And then we are growing. The journey matters. God is wanting us To grow, we're not talking about when we say we're growing, we're not talking about having this number today and more in number next week. What we're talking about is where I stand today. If you look at me in a year from now, I have grown dramatically in my relationship with God and in my relationship with others and my expression of God's love to the people that God brings into my life. But this is not who we are. This is what we do. And the question is, who are we? And so I have a story that I would like to read to you. It's a little bit long, but I will try to make it just interesting for you. And if you will, just listen along with me. And as we do, allow God to begin building a picture in your mind and in your heart to answer the question of, who is Harbor? At a fundraising dinner for a school that serves learning disabled children, the father of one of the students delivered a speech that would never be forgotten by all who attended. After extolling the school and its dedicated staff, he offered a question. When not interfered with by outside influences, everything nature does is done with perfection. And yet, he said, my son Shay cannot learn things as other children do. He cannot understand things as other children do. Where is the natural order of things in my son? The audience was stilled by the query, and the father continued, I believe that when a child like Shay, physically and mentally handicapped, comes into the world, an opportunity to realize human nature presents itself, he said. And it comes in the way of other people and how they treat that child. Then he told the following story. Shay and his father had walked past a park where some boys Shay knew were playing ball. Shay asked, do you think they'll let me play, Daddy? Shay's father knew that most of the boys would not want someone like Shay on their team, but the father also understood that if his son were allowed to play, it would give him a much-needed sense of belonging and some confidence to be accepted by others in spite of his handicaps. Shay's father approached one of the boys on the field and asked if Shay could play, not expecting much in return. The boy looked around for guidance, and a few of the boys nodded approval. Why not? So he took matters into his own hands and said, we are losing by 6 runs, and the game is in the 8th inning. I guess he can be on our team, and we'll try to put him at bat in the 9th inning. Shay struggled over the team's bench, put on his team's shirt, and gave a broad smile as his father had a small tear in his eye and warmth in his heart. The boys saw the father's joy at his son being accepted. In the bottom of the 8th inning, Shay's team scored a few runs, but were still behind by 3. In the top of the 9th inning, Shay put on a glove and played in right field. Even though no hits came his way, he was obviously ecstatic just to be in the game and on the field, grinning from ear to ear as his father waved to him from the stands. In the bottom of the 9th inning, Shay's team scored again. Now with 2 outs and the bases loaded, the potential winning run was on base, and Shay was scheduled to be at bat. At this juncture, do they let Shay bat and give away their last chance to win the game? Surprisingly, Shay was given the bat. Everyone knew that a hit was all but impossible because Shay didn't even know how to hold the bat properly, much less connect with the ball. However, as Shay stepped up to the plate, the pitcher, recognizing the other team put the winning aside, for this moment in Shay's life, they moved in a few steps to lob the ball in softly so Shay could at least be able to make contact. The first pitch came and Shay swung clumsily and he missed. The pitcher again took a few steps forward to toss the ball softly towards Shay. As the pitch came in, Shay swung at the ball and hit a slow ground ball right back to the pitcher. The game would have been over, but the pitcher picked up the soft grounder and could have easily thrown the ball to the first baseman. Shea would have been out, and that would have been the end of the game. Instead, the pitcher threw the ball right over the head of the first baseman, out of the reach of all of his teammates, everyone from the stands. And both teams started yelling, "Shea, run to first! Run to first!" Never in his life had Shea ever ran that far, but he made it to first base. He scampered down the baseline wide-eyed and startled. Everyone yelled, "Run to second! Run to second!" Catching his breath, Shea awkwardly ran towards second, gleaming and struggling to make it to second base. By the time Shea rounded towards second base, the right fielder had the ball and smallest guy on their team. He had the chance to be the hero for his team for the first time. He could have thrown the ball to the second baseman for the tag, but he understood the pitcher's intentions, and he too intentionally threw the ball high and far over the third baseman's head. Shea ran towards third base deliriously as the runners ahead of him circled the bases towards home. All were screaming, "Shea, Shea, Shea, all the way!" When Shea reached third base, the opposing shortstop ran to help him, turned him in the direction of third base, and shouted, "Run to third, run to third." As Shea rounded third, the boys from both teams and those watching were on their feet screaming, "Shea, run home!" Shea ran towards home, stepped on the plate, and was cheered as the hero who hit the grand slam and won the game for his team. "That day," said the father softly, with tears now rolling down his face, "the boys from both teams helped bring a piece of true love and humanity into this world." Shea didn't make it to another summer. He died that winter, having never forgotten being the hero and making his father so happy, and coming home and seeing his mother tearfully embrace her little hero that day. You see, we are not the fastest, nor is Harbor the biggest or the most awesome. We are not conservative or progressive. We're not rich, nor are we poor. We are the Mephibosheth and the Ishbosheth. We are only deserving of outcast and ruin. But in reality, we are, all of us, Harbor family. We are a family of members here to tell all the Shays in the world, "Shea, run! Run! Run towards home. You hit the grand slam, and you are your father's hero." You see, we are here to point the Shays, the Mephibosheths, and the Ishbosheths. We are here as a church family to point them towards first, then second, rounding third, and on home to their proud father who's waiting for them because they hit a grand slam. So in a nutshell, who is Harbor.Church? We are a place where Shea can belong. Would you bow your heads with me? Father, I come to you today. I ask that you take something that has been read or said, or even something from somebody's past that all of a sudden hindsight is brought into a 2020 clarity, and use it, God, in each one of our lives. God, if there's a Shea here today that has not yet put on the jersey, today may they open their heart and say, "Yes. Yes, I want that. I want the love of God. I want the forgiveness of God. I want my dumpster fire put out. I want my shame to be erased. I want my awkwardness in running the basis of life. I want all of that to come into clarity because, God, you are my God, and I accept you. And for the rest of us that have already done that, God, help us today to commit that we will be the cheerleaders. We will put the faltering on our shoulders and we will carry them across the finish line. And when they stumble and when they fall, rather than finding fault and laughing at them, may we go to their side and may we bend down next to them and in humility realize we're just like them. And if it wasn't for the grace of God, we would be ruined. I ask this in the name of my Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Hey guys, thank you so much once again for being part of Harbor Online this morning. We are so grateful for the technology just to be able to gather virtually, to know that church doesn't have to be canceled for safety reasons, but we can still get together from the safety of our homes. We thank you so much just for being a part of it today. Really quick, before we sign off, I do want to let you know, if you made a decision today, for the very first time, maybe you accepted the forgiveness that Jesus offers, maybe you want to get baptized, maybe God's just doing something in your heart that you want to share with us, please do so. We want to celebrate with you. We want to come alongside you. We want to pray for you. Maybe that you have a prayer request that you would like to share either with the staff privately, or we have a whole team of people that would love to pray for you. You can click the link in the caption and let us know about all of that stuff. And you can also go there to let us know about anything else that you want to get in on, anything you want to sign up for, events coming up. That link is the place to go to stay connected at Harbor. And also, if you'd like to give and be a part of what's going on at Harbor financially, you can click that same link. You can text any amount to 84321. You can send in the mail the old-fashioned way if you'd like. But if that's something you'd like to get in on and be a part of what's going on at Harbor in that way, we do encourage you to do so. That's all we've got for today. I hope you have an awesome week, and we will see you soon.